You don't arrive at the Ottoman palace through a front door. You disappear into it. The Bosphorus air is still on your skin when the first gate closes. Then another. Then another. Iron, cedar, stone, each one swallowing the sound of the city until even your own breathing feels too loud. A lantern swings ahead, painting the corridor in gold and shadow. You keep your eyes down because you've already learned the rule. Looking is a kind of asking, and asking is punished. A tall figure waits at the turn, silent, shaved, dressed in black. He doesn't touch you. He measures you with a glance that feels like a blade. Behind him, a clerk opens a ledger and dips a pen. Ink scratches paper. Your age becomes a line. Your height becomes a line. The scars you tried to hide, everything becomes a line. The page is calm. You are not. You pass a courtyard where water sings into marble. The sound should be soothing, but it isn't. You notice what the fountains are really for, to drown out other noises. A laugh that cuts off too quickly, a prayer whispered through teeth. A sudden thud, then a soft shuffle as someone learns to move quietly again. Another gate, a narrower hall. The air changes, warmer, scented with soap and rose oil, the kind of luxury that makes your stomach tighten because it doesn't belong to you. Doors line the walls like sealed mouths. No one calls you by your name here. Names belong to families, to villages, to lives that can be traced. Inside these walls you are a number, a face to be memorized, a body to be trained. You are taught when to speak, when to bow, how to lower your lashes, how to smile without showing fear. You learn that sleep has rules. So does bathing. So does breathing. You were told the imperial harem was a paradise of silk, songs, jewels, love stories written in calligraphy. That's what the paintings show. That's what the tourist guides hint at. But behind the polished myths, the harem was a machine. And machines don't care if you're afraid. People like to say the Ottoman harem was the Sultan's pleasure palace. It's a neat phrase, easy to repeat, easy to imagine, easy to sell. It turns real women into decoration and real power into gossip. Because the harem wasn't a bedroom, it was an institution, a guarded city inside a palace, staffed, funded, supervised, and obsessed with control. It had teachers, guards, and a ladder of ranks that decided who could stand where, who could speak when, who could even be seen. It had gatekeepers with keys and power in their silence, eunuchs who controlled movement, messages, and access. And above it all, there was rule. Sometimes the sultans, often the Valid sultans, always the palaces. Every hallway had eyes, every favor had a price. For the girls brought into it, by purchase, tribute, war, kidnapping, or desperation, it could mean a life of velvet that still felt like a cage. History polished this story until it shined. It swapped coercion for romance. It replaced discipline with perfume. It took a system built to produce heirs, loyalty, and silence, and turned it into a fantasy of choice. In this script, we're going to peel that shine away. You'll see how a new girl was stripped of her old identity, renamed, trained in language, manners, faith, and obedience, then tested like a candidate for a throne she didn't choose, how friendships became traps and small mistakes became disasters. How a whisper could lift someone into favor or send her to confinement, exile, or a quiet disappearance from the records. And you'll see the most terrifying part. The harem could make a woman powerful enough to shape an empire and still treat her as replaceable. By the end, you won't hear the word concubine the same way again. To understand what the Ottoman harem really was, you have to stop imagining it as a room and start seeing it as a government inside a palace. This is Istanbul at the height of imperial power. Outside the walls, markets, mosques, Ships, noise, crowds, life you can vanish into. Inside the walls, the inner palace, a sealed world where access is currency and privacy is a myth. The harem sits at the center of that world like a locked heart. Officially, it's the women's quarters. In practice, it's the dynasty's most protected factory, a place built to produce heirs, manage bloodlines, and control the most dangerous resource in an empire: succession. Because in the Ottoman system, a prince wasn't just a son, he was a future crisis, a future civil war, a future purge. Every birth could shift alliances, trigger fear, and rearrange power overnight. That's why the harem had rules so strict they could pass for religion. Who controls it? Sometimes the sultan, on paper. Often the Valid sultan, the sultan's mother, who could run the harem like a minister runs a ministry. And between them and everyone else, layers of authority that decide who gets taught, who gets promoted, who gets noticed, and who gets erased. Eunuchs guard doors and carry messages, controlling movement in and out. Senior women control discipline and training. Everyone below learns quickly. You don't rise by being seen. You rise by being useful and safe. And here's the detail history loves to skip. Most women in the harem were not favorites. Most never became the sultan's beloved. They were staff. They were trainees. They were servants in a system that used beauty the same way an army uses steel, as a resource to be sorted, sharpened, and deployed. Your first months, sometimes years, would be about transformation. Language, etiquette, faith, silence, how to walk without drawing attention, how to bow without resentment showing in your shoulders, how to smile like gratitude when what you feel is terror. You are renamed because a new name cuts the last thread to your old life. You are taught that the harem is protection and that the outside world is chaos. The message is simple. The cage is safer than freedom, so you should love the bars. You also learn the ladder. There are ranks, duties, and tiny privileges that feel enormous because you have so little. Better clothing, a warmer room, a task closer to the center, a teacher who doesn't hit, a supervisor who notices you. And once you understand the ladder, you understand the trap. The harem doesn't only control you with fear, it controls you with hope. Because hope makes people police themselves. This is the world behind the velvet. Not a romance, not a gossip tale. A closed institution where every corridor has a purpose, every silence has a watcher, and every favor is part of a larger calculation. And now that you understand the world, we can talk about the machine itself. How it processed girls into assets, how it manufactured obedience, and why the most terrifying punishments were often the quiet ones. Here's the part the polished version never explains. The harem didn't run on seduction, it ran on procedure. The first procedure is removal. You are removed from your old identity so cleanly it feels like surgery. A new name, a new language, new rules for your body, how you sit, how you eat, how you look at the floor so your eyes don't become an accusation. Even your silence is trained, because in a closed institution, silence isn't emptiness, it's discipline. Then comes the second procedure, sorting. The harem watches you the way an administrator watches a workforce. Who learns fast? Who breaks? Who obeys without sulking? Who is resilient? Who is charming? Who is dangerous? Not dangerous because she's bad, but dangerous because she's memorable. And in a palace built on succession anxiety, being memorable is a kind of a weapon. So they build layers. At the bottom, tasks that keep you busy and tired. Cleaning, carrying, serving, learning. Above that, more trusted positions, closer to influential women, closer to information. And above that, the roles where you are no longer just labor. You are an asset, a face that might be presented, a presence that might be noticed. The ladder is not a fair system of merit. It's a system of control that turns every girl into her own competitor. And that's not accidental. Because the harem's greatest trick is that it doesn't only lock doors, it locks people inside a social maze where the safest path is to obey. If you're promoted, you become visible. If you're visible, you become a target. If you're targeted, you learn to smile harder and speak softer and never reveal what you know. Now, the third procedure, access. In the popular fantasy, the Sultan chooses from a room full of women like he's picking a flower. The reality is colder. Access is controlled through gatekeepers, schedules, and influence. Eunuchs don't just guard the doors, they control messages, movement, and who gets near the center at all. Senior women supervise the young. Supervisors report upward, and the most powerful people inside this world are often not the men outsiders obsess over. They're the women who manage the harem's daily machine, and the valide sultan who can decide what protection means today. Access becomes a currency. A kind word from the right person can move you up the ladder. A rumor can push you down. A small mistake can be interpreted as disobedience. A glance can become insolence. A quiet friendship can become conspiracy. In a palace that runs on suspicion, intent doesn't matter as much as what someone can claim you intended. And because the harem is sealed, the punishment that hurts most isn't public humiliation. It's something far more efficient. Being made invisible. Demotion. Reassignment. Confinement. Transfer to a quieter building where time slows and names stop being spoken. Not a dramatic execution, just a quiet administrative decision that removes you from the game. If the empire is a stage, the harem controls who is allowed to step into the light and who is quietly pushed behind the curtain. But it gets worse when the machine produces what it was built to produce, a child. Because in the Ottoman world, motherhood could be power, and also a trap. If you bear a son, your status changes. Your future changes. Your danger level changes. Suddenly, you are no longer just a person in a hierarchy. You are a piece in the succession puzzle. And succession puzzles attract knives, not just in hands, but in smiles, whispers, and paperwork. Now, every woman with influence has a reason to care about you. Some will protect you. Some will try to use you. Some will try to bury you. The harem's politics aren't catty drama. They are state politics, because the dynasty's stability runs through wombs, nurseries, and the invisible war of factions. That's why education isn't only about music, sewing, poetry, and manners. It's about manufacturing a very specific kind of person. Someone who can live under observation without collapsing. Someone who can smile while being evaluated. Someone who can keep secrets even from her own faith. Someone who can be loyal without ever forgetting that loyalty is demanded, not requested. And then there's the final procedure, replacement. This is the most terrifying truth for anyone trapped inside. The harem is designed to make you believe you are special, because belief makes you compliant. But the institution itself treats people as replaceable. Someone else can be trained. Someone else can be presented. Someone else can take the room you fought for. Even favor is unstable, because favor is not love. Favor is a political condition that can change with a mood, a whisper, a loss of interest, a new arrival, a new fear. One day you are called. The next day you are not. And in a system where your life is built on being called, silence can feel like a sentence. So the harem does what every strong institution does when it wants obedience. It rewards you just enough to keep you hoping, and punishes you just enough to keep you afraid. That's the machine behind the perfume. Not a fantasy, not a romance, a controlled environment built to shape bodies into etiquette people into assets, and women into moving parts of an empire that could not afford disorder, especially not inside the walls where heirs were made. And once you see the machine, you can finally understand why the scariest moments in the harem weren't always screams. Sometimes the scariest moment was the sound of footsteps stopping outside your door and then walking away. Once you understand the machine, the romantic version of the harem collapses because romance requires choice. And the harem's core weapon wasn't cruelty for entertainment. It was uncertainty. You never knew what the palace thought of you today. A compliment could be a test. A gift could be a trap. A sudden promotion could be a setup. Because visibility doesn't just bring opportunity. It brings enemies. And inside a sealed institution, enemies don't need swords. They need words. One whisper to the right person and your personality becomes a crime. Not because you did something monstrous, but because the palace could label anything monstrous if it needed to. Disrespect, arrogance, improper conduct, dangerous influence. These phrases don't sound terrifying until you realize they are paperwork-shaped weapons. Clean, tidy, deniable. A sentence that doesn't leave bruises. A sentence that still changes your life. And the punishments? The punishments rarely look like the horror stories people want to tell. They look like administrative erasure. First, you're moved. Not dragged, moved. Reassigned. Quietly shifted from a corridor where things happen to a corridor where nothing happens. A smaller room. A colder room. A role that keeps you busy, but irrelevant. The palace doesn't need to break you in public. It only needs to make you feel the door closing in your mind. Then, you become someone people stop greeting. That's when fear becomes real. Because human beings can survive pain, but they don't survive being treated like they don't exist. You realize the harem can do something worse than hurt you. It can make you unremembered. And if you think, at least I'll have friends, understand this. Friendship in the harem is complicated. It can be a lifeline, and it can be a leash. People aren't only kind here, they're strategic. They attach themselves to rising stars. They abandon falling ones. They trade information like currency, because in the palace, information is the closest thing to freedom. So you learn to watch your own tongue. Because a careless sentence can escape your mouth and return as an accusation. Now add the most dangerous variable of all. Favor. The polished story says the favored woman wins. The truth is uglier. Favor isn't a crown, it's a spotlight. It means people count your steps. It means senior women measure your influence. It means gatekeepers decide whether your message reaches its destination. It means your future is now connected to the mood of men you can't control and the politics of women who can. And if you bear a child, especially a son, the spotlight turns into something hotter. Because now your body is no longer only yours. It's a dynasty question. Suddenly, you aren't merely competing for comfort or status. You are caught in the empire's most violent mathematics, succession. People talk about palace intrigue like it's a game. It isn't. It's survival disguised as etiquette. A smiling face can hide a knife made of rumor. A gentle voice can carry a threat wrapped in concern. For your safety, someone says, while pulling you away from the center. And this is where the stories become truly terrifying. Not because they are cinematic, but because they are plausible. Imagine you're a girl who finally learned the rules. You finally earned a warm room. You finally reached a rank where you feel safe enough to breathe. Then a new arrival comes in. Younger, more interesting to someone important, more useful to someone powerful. The air changes. The tone shifts. You feel it before you can name it. Eyes linger longer. Conversations stop when you enter. You are no longer invited to the places where information flows. You didn't do anything wrong. You were simply replaced. Or imagine something worse. Your protector falls. One day, the woman who favored you is influential. The next day, she is out of favor, blamed for something, accused of overstepping, tied to the wrong faction. And because you were attached to her, you fall like a shadow falling off a wall. The palace does this with terrifying efficiency. It punishes networks, not just individuals. It teaches everyone a lesson without saying a word. And when a lesson isn't enough, the harem has another option that doesn't look like punishment at all. A transfer. A move to another residence, another building, another life. Sometimes framed as mercy, sometimes framed as duty, sometimes framed as honor. The language is soft, so soft that outsiders mistake it for kindness. But inside the harem, you learn what soft language can hide, a removal from the board. Because once you are moved far enough away, you stop being a problem. And the most chilling part is this. The official history doesn't always need to lie. It only needs to stop talking. A name appears in the records for a few years, then vanishes. No scandal, no funeral, no explanation, just silence. And in a palace built on secrecy, silence is not the absence of something. Silence is a decision. So when people say, the harem was luxurious, remember, a cage can be lined with silk and still be a cage. A prison can smell like rose oil. A system can teach you poetry with one hand and erase you with the other. And now we arrive at the final truth. History hates most because it doesn't fit fantasies. The harem could create women powerful enough to influence empires, and it could still destroy them quietly, cleanly, and without witnesses. Next, we'll end where the polished story never wants to end. What freedom looks like for a woman leaving the harem, and why even the exit could feel like another kind of door closing. The polished story ends with perfume and silk, like the harem was a private romance sealed inside marble. But real institutions don't run on romance. They run on control. For most women, there was no fairy tale ending, just a series of doors. A door into training, a door into visibility, a door into replacement, and sometimes a final door out, framed as freedom, that still came with strings. Reassignment, marriage arranged for political convenience, exile into a quieter life where the palace could forget you without risk. That's the terrifying truth history cleaned up. The harem wasn't a love story. It was a system built to protect a dynasty by managing bodies, information, and fear. And the most dangerous part of a system like that isn't what it does in public. It's what it can do in silence. So the next time you see the harem sold as fantasy, remember the fountains, not to entertain, but to drown out sounds no one was meant to hear. Because the palace didn't need the world to approve. It only needed the world to look away.